Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition, where we go deep on the secrets of the craft and give you the inner workings of the audio and podcasting and video podcasting industries, breaking it down on behalf of the chief audio officer. That is the person, the marketer who is responsible for making campaigns successful on these channels. They're unique, they are not like the others, and they all require a little bit of nuanced understanding. And so we try to talk about what's going on in the marketplace and come together to give you best practices and perspectives so that you can be more successful in those efforts. Today, we have a lot to talk about. Last week was Podcast Movement Evolutions. Podcast Movement is arguably the leading conference that happens in this field that we call podcasting. And I think, it's hard to disentangle what is our own involvement in that event, because I think that, as a unified group with Oxford Road and Veritone One coming together, we made a lot of noise at this event, and I think we should give that some time to unpack while we're all here. But we weren't the only ones there, and there was a lot happening. There's so much changing in this industry. So we had, probably a dozen folks on the ground at the event, covered a lot of panels. We launched a white paper with a study from Edison talking about what consumers believe a podcast is. We offered a definition to the industry of what we believe a podcast is. We launched a 3-part series called What's a Podcast, where we showed clips of interviews and kind of tied it all into a 3-part, 30-minute apiece narrative series, a limited series, largely taken from interviews conducted on this show, where we got industry leaders to talk about what is a podcast, why does it matter, and what does the industry need to do next. And then we challenged the industry, and we said that, look, let's get serious here. There's a lot that's broken. There's a lot of measurement, starting with measurement and not only how we define ourselves, but what are the metrics that we need to look at no matter where your show is running, and what are the ways that we measure results in a unified way. And we challenge the industry to come together and create an open protocol that accommodates that, whether you're looking at results from a YouTube show that is a podcast, or it's something that is fed through an RSS. And so we put some we definitely sent some signals to the market that it's time for change. And we really are trying to be change agents in leading that way forward. So we're going to get into all of that today. But let me tell you who we have with us. We have some very powerful contributors, both to this agency and at the event. I think everybody here was on stage at some point and bringing messages that we see to the market, but also collecting a lot of information as well. So we have Bart Roselli, who is SVP of Media at Oxford Road and Veritone One. We did not announce a new name, but welcome, Bart. We're glad to have you with us today on the Media Roundtable.
Good to be here.
We have Connor Doyle, who is president at Oxford Road and Veritone One, who was also with us at the conference last week. Welcome, Connor. We have Miranda Romano, SVP of Media at Oxford Road and Veritone One. Welcome, Miranda.
Excited to be here.
And we have Stu Redwine, VP of Creative Services for Oxford Road and Veritone One. Welcome back, Stu.
Thank you for having me.
All right, we've got some soft-spoken folks. We have some loud, bombastic people. We're going to have a real diversified perspective here. So welcome, everybody. Off we go. So why don't we just start with a bit of an open-ended one and just get a little bit of a roundup. I'm going to start with you, Stu. What were the key themes that you keyed in on at the event overall?
Well, thank you. The main theme is that something you talked about in your talk, which is the Wild West era is officially over. Kind of. It was funny. I had some conversations with people about that as well, that there is still some unknowns, but the real push right now is for the industry to grow up. And that's what you called for. Cleaner data, standardized measurement, less gatekeeping. You nailed it. And it wasn't just you talking about that. I think you put to voice the zeitgeist of where podcasting is at in 2025.
And were you hearing that type of a message in some of the other sessions that you were able to attend?
Yes. For sure. Because especially the room that I was in as I was waiting for my session to start, I was listening to other talks because I kept going back and forth, and it's a resounding theme, this measurement piece, and just this idea of it's time for podcasting to grow up. It's a serious channel for folks, particularly in light of the podcast election. It's a very serious space.
Well, what was interesting, I was watching the main stage, Tuesday and Wednesday. And I was surprised at how much I didn't hear about the podcast election. And I wonder if it's because everything's so polarized. And as soon as you say anything about Trump or associate podcasting with that, all of a sudden becomes, more polarizing. I don't know what the reason is, but it was such an important event, I think, in demonstrating the power of the medium, whether you like what happened or not, that I was actually a little surprised that it wasn't more readily discussed.
Well, I'll say this. I didn't hear it from stage. Where I would hear it is in questions, follow-up questions after someone had spoken. People weren't courageous enough to include it in their content necessarily from stage, but in questions, it invariably would come up after when they would open up for Q&A. That would become something that people would bring up.
Bart, I'm going to put you in the hot seat next. What stood out to you as you look across the different sessions that you were a part of or got to sit in on?
Yeah. First, I would say, it feels like Evolutions is like growing in foot traffic from that perspective. Before, it was always kind of like it was the precursor to the main one in August. But I can't seem to escape, Dan, the thought of like, it feels like podcasts, we're spending billions of dollars annually, right? You touched on this about how we need to kind of bring just transparency full front and center. I just keep thinking about the analogy of like, you go into your garage, you're like, wow, I have a lot of amazing stuff in here. But why is this over there? Why is this over here? Feels like this could really be highlighted and looked in a better way if we do a little bit of cleanup. And it feels like that was like just the analogy I could not escape out of it. Still tons of excitement in the channel and why we're spending billions of dollars, but it felt like one of those ones where like, hey, we hit this point where we really need to do some strong control checks and put this in place if we're going to go from 3-4 billion to 10 billion next.
Yeah, it's interesting. And, one of the things, I've been doing so much research just in preparation for everything we put out in this event. And, we kind of got stalled out around the $2 billion number domestically. Like for a while, I felt like during the pandemic, every year it's like, oh, we're going to have more billions next year and more billions next year. And then all of a sudden it's like, no, actually, just kidding. We're going to stay here for a while. And when you look at the confusion around definition and you think about like Google, just clean example, they know how much revenue comes from what they categorize as a podcast. And I am positive from the projections I've been able to run, that is not reflected in the $2 billion, right? But what happens is you get, institutional lending that gets behind publishers or creators or infrastructure providers and technologies that will actually help us expand the business. And they pull back when they read that the sector is flat. And so there's consequences to this stuff all the way down to the creator. But I think, it's really, some of it is we don't even know how to take credit for what we are doing as an industry, in addition to the fact that we need to break up some of those bottlenecks. So yeah, that really stood out as well. Connor, how about you?
Yeah, to me, I mean, it's straight up. I think it starts off easily said as, video's impact on podcasting. However, it's more than that. It's social's impact on podcasting. It's a lot of other media channels. I think, a lot of folks are releasing long form shows on X. And so it's just this like consistent layer of what is a podcast. So I think it's been on the tip of people's tongues for a while. There's a lot of great reports from Ashley Carmen and Bloomberg about video's impact. A lot of people are saying video's impact, and you see YouTube with a stage at Podcast Movement Evolutions talking about, their views on things. But I think, to credit to you, your presentation really summed it up. And I think taking folks through the history of that and how we've evolved and how we're ending up at this place, and to really solidify it, especially in terms of how brands are struggling with the definition. I think the slide showing the funnel confusion, I think really hit home for a lot of folks.
I got more feedback on that slide than probably anything else, because one of the things that we were able to do is just visualize all of the unnecessary filters we apply to the business, because an advertiser doesn't know what budget this should come out of. There's conflict between teams, marketing teams with different scopes, trying to play tug of war, because it's like, well, what percentage of it percentage of your consumption is on YouTube so that you still pull it out of this budget versus that, right? It's just gotten really, really messy. So, and then, when it comes to the standardized measurement, it really seems like things are changing. I was walking around, I'll just chime in with one of my observations too. I was walking around and, there was a YouTube Village type of situation, right? Where they were really focused on the video-based creator work. And I was listening just for a few minutes to somebody explaining, like, here's how you can succeed in, YouTube. And the speaker was talking about how, well, what the algorithm really wants you to do is, and then giving specific feedback about how to appease the algorithm. And I'm like, wow. We're there. Like, there is, like, Big Brother is with us now. Like, it's everywhere we go, and we are all serving the algorithm. And I think that, so many of us, I think as part of this discussion, all of us are decade plus veterans, right? And we were at the start when we had to explain what a podcast was before we have to figure that out again. And, but it always was such an indie thing. It was always such a place that wasn't like having to adhere to like one constituency or one entity. And what's kind of crazy to see, and look, there's good that comes with it too, the expansion of the channel, the ability to promote. But with the shift to video and all of these platforms, that a lot of that independence is at risk of being lost as people start to cater to the algorithm and not to their community, which I think is part of where the magic came from, right? And that's why we also want to make sure we keep that stuff intact, even as we evolve to accommodate the algorithms, right?
Audiences over algorithms,
Audience over algorithms.
That's what our advertisers have been trading on for so long, right? Is a leaned-in experience, the benefit of someone seeking out content or a particular podcaster, and finding something special and primarily in the form like long form. And then when I think of algorithms, I think of stuff pushed at you, right? And it finds you because of other interests or other things that you might have, uncovered. And like you said, there's a lot of good behind that. But I think, we just, as an advertising community, I think we have to keep an eye on, exploding audiences. When we see content, a particular podcast go viral because of a guest who might be on, that doesn't always lead to brand performance. When we have an ad on that show, it's not a one-to-one relationship. So I think we just have to keep tabs on that as we grow as an industry. If we're gonna, continue to hold like these engagement metrics that transfer over to brand performance at the forefront of the industry.
Hear, hear. Okay, Miranda.
Yes.
Would love to hear your thoughts, and we're going to do 2 rounds of this, but this is just kind of key themes that came up about podcasting specifically.
Yeah, so really 2 key themes for me. And the first is just kind of going back to the mess. The biggest theme was the push from publishers from being an audio first company to a multimedia company. We saw this from the big players. We saw this from the independents. Publishers are really expanding their offerings. So from social, newsletter, YouTube, they're looking for expanded monetization opportunities. And we on the front lines are seeing an increasing number of full package channels. In some cases, publishers are trying to force advertisers to buy all of the channels to get to audio. And, I'm here to say like that is not going to work. Advertisers need flexibility, or else they'll just move their dollars somewhere else. There are a lot of other places to spend that media. I think, if we can prove audio works as a standalone first, we'll have a lot more confidence in testing those other channels. And a network that does that pretty well is Young and Profiting, right? We test audio first. If it works, then we scale into the other channels if there's not enough inventory, or if we see that as an opportunity for new audience. As stewards of the dollars, I'm here to say we're going to be strategic. So we're going to be looking at the overlap. Is it new reach? Are the audience as engaged as audio? Is it priced effectively? My big recommendation to publishers is just as we have here at our agency specialists in social, in YouTube, and podcasting, I would recommend publishers bring the same level of expertise to their own sales models, especially if they are going to be bundling channels and just hoping that it works. It's not sustainable.
So just to get a little more tactical on that, when you're talking about this, and you were talking about Yap, right, as a use case. And so you're saying like you'll run a test on RSS that is audio specific before you even work on the simulcast, the video component. And that's even before you even touch other channels that they might be active in.
Sometimes the simulcast is included. And so we actually see the best performance by far from those publishers and creators that sell on the baked in model, where you get the RSS and you get the YouTube. But yes, so we would test that before extending into like a YouTube only or a newsletter or a post on Instagram. We always use audio as sort of home base, and then we build from there.
It's a super good point, Miranda, because I think you're saying like understand what you're selling if you're going to have a value attached to it.
Yeah.
I think we had a recent proposal that we were going back and forth on, which had a pretty significant portion of the impressions on X, which is great, right? New platform, that's fine. But when we started to see some of the data back in the analytics behind listening, it was clear that our assumptions were correct, that we weren't going to assign a value to X until we had some intelligence. And I think the figure that I have was like 1% of the audience going past 25% of the show type thing. So like it can be very different, depending on what platform you're on. So it's a super good point.
Not all channels are created equal, and not all of them work, right? Everything can work at the right price, but we do see that in audio, there's a lot more engagement than other places. So yeah, there just needs to be education on the publisher side before they just start to push that on advertisers.
It's interesting that you bring up X and Yap specifically, because I did get to sit in on your panel, Miranda, and I believe it was Hala Taha, right? She was talking about how, when you're a publisher, you're always competing to bring talent onto your network, and you're looking at their track record of how much reach they had. And she's like, yeah, the difference is people would come to us because they're trying to get a good upfront deal, and they show us their cumulative reach. And she's like, we have to discard X because there's so much inflated numbers that the numbers beneath it are not reliable, and people are trading on that. So you can come up with a funky workaround that isn't based on legitimate consumption that's going to give your show really big numbers. And if you're not discerning about that and you don't care, then you pass that to us, or heaven forbid, somebody that doesn't have the data to know to filter it. And then you end up buying fake impressions, and the show never reaches its full potential for what they thought they were buying because it was based on bogus numbers.
Yeah. It's why the specialist component is so important, number one. But two, we've got the largest performance data set in podcasting. And it's why it's like, we look at the audience, we look at the downloads, but we also look at, based on the combined 20 years of performance data, how much is this actually worth based on what we see in terms of cost per acquisition and return on ROI? Because from a measurement standpoint, like not only from the advertiser perspective, is it really confusing, but on the publisher side, it's really confusing. And in my conversations, there were frustrations around how to manage all of these different metrics, right? In video, there's no such thing as an impression. It's a view, and it's measured differently than an impression in podcasting. And so, yeah, this is a huge pain point for the industry on all sides that we all, I think, need to pay more attention to.
So let's talk a little bit more broadly, because some of this is about podcasting and some of it's about podcasting relative to the rest of the advertising marketplace, right? And there's a lot changing everywhere. If we think more broadly, Stu, going back to you, what are some of the themes that stood out?
For advertising in general, I think it's that the volume of meh is too high, that the extraordinary cost of being dull, that was making the rounds earlier this year. And what I'm referring to is with all the AI tools, if humans were able to so successfully create advertisements that 84% of them are forgotten completely and not remembered or correctly attributed, when you put that in the hands of an intellect that's vastly superior to ours and can work at a much faster speed, we just see more and more of it. And zooming in, relating it to what we do, and particularly to podcasting, I even posted something on LinkedIn where, podcasting doesn't have to become commercial radio, but man, as you listen to the breaks, that is what seems to be happening. It's just an increased number of breaks, increased ads in the break. And then, like I'm saying, it's with the tools that are out there, you can create a spot with music and sound effects and great human sounding voices, but It's kind of where's the beef and where's the authenticity? That's the part that we have to fight to preserve.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Bart?
Yeah, I think I think a couple of years ago, kind of felt like there was this unlimited spigot of money going out to acquire big name talent. And I think everybody kind of came back and realized, wow, I got to manage to some kind of profitability baseline from a sales perspective. So hearing from the partners was that we are going to be more intentional and strategic about who we're going out to sign. That doesn't mean there's not going to be show movement and acquisition and growth and support. It's just not going to it's going to be done with a little bit more of a careful lens, which we echoed the importance of. Just because you paid $2 million on a guarantee up front doesn't mean our clients are going to absorb that cost of goods on their side. So we support and promote that. And we want to be there to help support in any way from that perspective, because it is math. In the end is, it costs this. The delivery is this. The performance was this. Can we make it work? Can we optimize it for the client's performance perspectives? And I think that is something that everybody's kind of felt like there's been a big splash of cold water in terms of being far more intentional with how future dollars are being spent, because it's not about, and I think we've said it too, and even I've said it to vendors, is more doesn't mean better. You're probably off better being in a place where you can monetize and extrapolate the best value and create the best vetting process for clients, making sure the brands are aligned and make sense. I think that's really important. I think there's been a little bit of come to Jesus on that.
It really feels that way. I mean, there's so much that continues to change, and there's a lot of confusion right now that we're trying to lean into, obviously. But, one of the things that I think is positive about where the industry is like, we got into this COVID thing that immediately, I don't know if you guys remember the first month, but it was kind of like, what's going to happen to this channel with people off the road, right? Nobody knew, and advertisers started pulling back, and nobody wanted to be around all the news about it. And it was like, oh no, this is durable. This is here. And then all the money started, then the dumb money came, right? And they started pouring all these, there were these space races just with endless budgets, because everybody made the assumption that it always goes up and to the right forever and all downloads are legit and all famous people will be Joe Rogan eventually, right? Some faulty premises. And then we came out of the pandemic, and I think the industry got a bit of a hangover, and Pete did his thing at Podscribe that recalibrated a lot of the fake downloads that were getting counted. And that kind of like shook everybody. And I think that cost some people some money, and investments started to pull back. But I think we're now getting into this more reasonable way of rebuilding. Like, you guys probably remember, we all came into the business around the beginning of the direct-to-consumer revolution, right? And that wasn't the internet's first wave of buying a lot of advertising. The first wave was the dot-com boom, when people were, had these ridiculous valuations on these startup brands that were worth nothing and made no money and had no path to making money. I think when we started connecting, both through Veritone One's work and through Oxford Road's work, we started working with the new generation of advertisers that were very metric minded. And when we came into work, when they came into this space, they all wanted to know, what's the ROAS, what's the cost per acquisition. It was very data driven. That wasn't the first wave of it. And I feel like podcasting very much had to go through a similar experience, where the dumb money has to flow. Everybody has to get kicked in the teeth. And then we go, okay, we actually probably need some math to rationalize these investments. And we're getting closer to that now. So in that way, I feel like we're moving in the right direction. Maybe. We'll see. Connor, how about you? What other themes did you pick up?
Well, I think, Podcast Movement Evolutions is about kind of what's next. And it seems to lean more industry folk for me. And you see a lot of like solid publishers there and sales reps out there. And that's one thing that was highlighted to me a couple times is, with as we improve technology, and to Stu's point about AI with creative, like the relationships at the heart of this industry are, have carried this through. A couple of advertisers mentioned to me, and certainly Melissa did on our panel, and highlighted the importance of a good sales rep who is the conduit and the facilitator between the talent and the brand at the publisher side, can have a huge impact on the overall performance of the campaign, as well as, I would say, to Stu's point about, just the overload of ads, can actually help the listener experience as well. Because, if you poll the audience for host-read ads that are authentic and done right, they're not a problem for the listening audience, right? It's the jarring ads that kind of interrupt the flow of the conversation or the content. And so I just think hearing the brands who have been in the space for a little while highlight and understand the importance of the relationships that make this industry work was pretty cool to see.
It's so interesting. That was one of the things that stood out to me the most outside of our own research and work. Connor and I got to do a duet on stage where he led a panel and I got to sit up there and chime in. But the real focus was that we had two brands up there, both from Boll and Branch and Simply Safe, right? And I thought it was so fascinating to hear them both talk about exactly what you're saying, which is the relationship between, our job is to shorten the line between the talent and the brand and not have all this, so much, automation, right? And what's everybody talking about everywhere outside of the brands? Automation, scale, making it less personal, trafficking the ads. But when you actually hear from the advertiser, they really miss some of that work that was happening more so, I think, earlier. And there's a desire for that. Now, what's interesting is, I'm not going to say who it was on the show here, but I was talking to one of the bigger publishers. And Bart, you heard this.
I already know where you're going. Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going like, why don't you guys would do so much better if you had 50% host read ads and 50% produced ads, you'd get a better yield. You'd make more money on your time with the same number of units. If you at least had as many host read, you always make more money per second because they're worth more when there's a recommendation. I said, so why is that not the majority of your projected revenue? And they said, well, we broke it down to how many steps are required to put an advertiser on the air. Miranda, have you heard this before? Okay. Guess how many steps it is to get a host read ad from signature to execution. And then guess how many steps it is when it's a produced ad that you're trafficking. Does anybody want to guess the top and the bottom there?
20.
Bart, you can't do it.
No.
12 and 2.
Steps. Oh, 12 to 2. I say 20 to 3.
20 to 3. Connor, you want to take a shot?
You better sit down.
It was about 80 to 20.
Wow.
Oh my.
80 to 20. But, look, that's where there's opportunity for innovation. How do you do it in fewer steps? How do you, some of the things I think we've been able to collectively create in the process of building this business, this collective business, is figuring out how to remove some of those steps. What can you syndicate when you're informing networks and hosts? Can you do that in broadly and then get more narrow in some of the other nuanced execution steps? But it shows that there's a legitimate reason why the market continues to pull towards, the efficient execution and not just all the talent driven creative. But the advertisers certainly appreciate and put a premium on the value of those relationships. It's really interesting.
Especially when, it's sometimes that reach out from a rep can spark a deal, right? Where they have knowledge that a talent has moved recently and they need a home security system. And, generally it's the right audience. And we give our, hey, POV and recommendation based on what we've seen and our analysis of the buy and the ad unit and all of that stuff. But when you have a story like that, you're like, hey, this deserves an opportunity to be shared with the audience. And so I think I'd like to see the evolution of the space kind of go towards more avails and RFPs that are more, kind of talent based. We did that early on with an Uber campaign that I just love, which was about, who has had a positive driver experience and are you willing to talk about that on the air? Like that's it, right? And it was just a wave for a couple of weeks of talent sharing their stories. And we had one situation where the driver was listening to the talent and DM'd them on Instagram, just like that kind of thing can really be neat.
Yeah.
I was going to say, Dan, I think there's let's not also forget about what got us here. Like those connective tissue points was what made things pop. And when we say pop to the point where a client says, where did I run? How did I get so many orders today? Where did that come from? That is really important. As we continue to commercialize the industry, we have to make sure we don't develop atrophy in terms of the things that got us here. And I think Connor's example is right on point. Is we talked a lot with our partners about hey, yes, let's fine tune RFPs and do that. But help us understand why this talent, there's tens of thousands of talent. And when you start looking at it from like what makes sense for each brand, we need to know why it's just a yes. That's great. You said yes. We always say all the time, and we've talked about it before, like we love when people say no. It means you actually read it. It means you actually cared about what you were doing. So we talked a lot about like how if there's ones on here that maybe don't perfectly align with the RFP, fight for it, rationalize, tell us why that it doesn't make sense, because it's not black and white. If it was that easy, everybody be doing it. So help us understand why this talent, when a client is looking at, hey, I've got 40, 50, 75 options to look at, why this person over somebody else.
Well, at the Media Roundtable, you know that we believe in having a big tent. And that means sometimes we might have the brothers from the Midas Touch Network on, who are very decidedly on the left. And it also means that we like to welcome our friends like the folks at the Daily Wire on the right. We don't have to all agree on everything in this polarized world, but at least with this program and at Oxford Road and Veritone One, we believe very deeply in treating others with respect and preserving the ability to have fair-minded discussion in an open marketplace. And, you know, that podcasting is the greatest canvas in media for the free and open exchange of ideas. And that leads me to tell you about our sponsor for today, who is the Daily Wire. The Daily Wire has had a transformative impact on so many advertisers, both that we work with and have worked with, and so many others beyond over the last decade. It really is astounding. For a decade, they've been fighting for brands and challenging conventional narratives and disrupting institutions who may have one way of thinking that they're bringing a challenge to. And you know what? My view is if I can't listen to somebody's perspective about an issue because it might disagree with my own, then I probably have some blind spots. So it's worth considering the importance of the conservative view in the podcast ecosystem if you're an advertiser. But this really isn't about getting you to listen. This is talking to you as a marketer, as a chief audio officer. If you're responsible for driving results for your business, you really need to be giving the Daily Wire a look. They have some of the most influential conservative voices in the world, and really they're still just kind of getting started in many ways. You know, names like Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Michael Knowles, Dr. Jordan Peterson, so many more. These guys have had a real impact. And they also have premium content that they put out. They have films, they have children's content. But again, let's just talk about it from an advertising standpoint, okay? I was talking to some folks on our team about working with the Daily Wire because we all have a business to run here. Let me tell you some of the things that they told me. What stands out when you work with the Daily Wire for your advertising campaign? Number one is transparency. You can't get it everywhere, but you certainly get it here. Nobody has to question the numbers that are being put out, and they go above and beyond to be authentic and true to the numbers that they report. Number two, they listen to their listeners. They survey their audience, they take feedback, and as a consequence, they do things that may feel counterintuitive, but are good for the marketplace, such as they dialed back their ad load recently. It's very rare that a publisher self-regulates in that sort of a way. But if you're an advertiser, that's very, very helpful for the impact that your ads are going to have. The third thing I would mention, and this is something that the team made abundantly clear, is that this is a group that is very advertiser friendly. It's getting increasingly difficult to get hosts to engage with the sponsors of their program, but not at the Daily Wire. They will get to know your product or your service. They will use it. They will understand your business and be able to talk about it, not just as somebody who's reading ad copy, but as a passionate user and as an expert on the product. And they do really clever integrations. So look, we've all had the experience of running a campaign where it feels like they're phoning it in, or they're a little detached, or they just don't care that much. You don't get that feeling working with the Daily Wire. And it's one of the reasons that they're one of the most impactful partners that we have. Look, at the end of the day, if you do advertising, it's because you're trying to grow your business. You're trying to get new customers. You're trying to expand through marketing. And the Daily Wire truly is in a class of its own in this regard. And I can give you case study after case study where it is the Daily Wire on an ad schedule and then everything else. Many times it will be multitudes higher in terms of volume of customers that are achieved as a direct result of this network compared to all others combined. I've seen it time and time again. So if you're a brand that is looking for that sort of growth, if you share our belief that it is important to measure the civility of a program and make sure you're being conscious about where your ads run, but willing to support shows that have ideas from both the left and the right, you need to look at the Daily Wire. Give them an email and find out what they can do for your business. Email them at advertisewithus@dailywireventures.com. That is advertisewithus@dailywireventures.com. These guys have been friends of the agency and to me for a long time, and we hope you'll give them a look. It's so fascinating, and we've been talking a lot, I think, inside of our organization, just about like where are the areas that we need to intentionally speed up and where are the ones that we need to intentionally slow down, right? And that's a great example of, if the talent actually takes the time to be discerning about who they're going to partner with. Like, I think when many of us were in radio, there was a known process where you had to convince the host to say yes to putting their name on the line, right? And I think we've seen a lot of degradation in that. And then it was like, if a host endorsed two competitors, that was a scandal, right? And today it's just like there's networks that are just throwing them out like whatever, they didn't run in the same show, and it's like, wait, you like State Farm and you like Geico? How does this, how do they both help you in your lives so much? But and then when we see things like, look, these are just rumors still, they haven't confirmed it, right? But YouTube, according to Semaphore, is apparently considering doing dynamically inserted host reads, right? And so how does that work when you've got one network representing you for your RSS feeds for a bank of inventory? And are they supposed to stay in coordination with the automated Google platform where you're just like bidding things out and they have to accept it? And that's how you're going to deal with category separation? Like, do we even care about that? Like, is the integrity of the host dead to the point where like the marketplace is no longer evaluating how much their own credibility is like really involved in this process? And so, look, this is why I think we'll all stay employed for a long time, because you need human beings to pay attention to this stuff and to care about it and to not do the thing that is most efficient and to fight for the brand that is getting shortchanged by all the races toward efficiency without discretion. Miranda, you're last on our round two of observations.
Well, there are two, and I'll start with the one most related to adding layers from the creator. So a big trend or theme this year, and I heard it from so many different people, is third-party sellers starting to get into the mix and causing major headaches. I think as podcasting has become more mainstream, has got a lot more attention, and YouTube creators come into the space, they're bringing their fragmented, messy sort of sales structure with them. We know a lot of the YouTube creators, they work with multiple different sellers, and it just creates such a lack of control and confusion. And it's even happening with legacy podcast networks. People are coming in claiming to represent inventory that they don't. So the advertiser goes through the whole RFP process only to learn that they can't actually execute against it. So it's risky for advertisers. And if you're buying direct, it's important just to do your research and just get as close to the creator as possible.
Well, and Bart and Connor, I think you guys have great experience working with talent agencies and a lot of those third parties. It's interesting. At Oxford Road, we started the agency mostly doing podcast and radio. Streaming hadn't really become a standalone yet. And then YouTube came right behind it when the MCN started to form. And for us, we went in and that was a very fast growing part of the business. But when they all imploded, it was such a disaster to try to figure out who to talk to and how to get fair pricing and how to get, make goods when you needed them. And, arbitrary price changes based on nothing and cost per impression that we backed out of it for a while and then came in a little later, but you guys really hung in there and worked through that. What can you share just about the complexity of the third parties that get involved that you wouldn't necessarily have with the traditional go-to network, purchase the ads and let them place the business?
Look, I think, our goal is to get as close to the creator as possible. And sometimes that can be through various sources, as you point out. And sometimes creators have a flow with one party who sells them and a flow with another, or a type of ad unit or a type of asset or a guaranteed structure on views or, something a little different. So on one hand, to your point, Dan, it can be more challenging in terms of executing on a campaign like that. We have collectively found the benefit for our clients and the ROAS that we can generate and the opportunity for them is worth the extra effort essentially to activate there. And so I think there's also, just general opportunity in a chaotic marketplace. Sometimes when we tried to bring our organizational structure to YouTube and, we're still trying to do that, I think, but I think that's what we've been working towards. That's my attempt at an answer on that one. Bart, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I would echo that, Connor. I've been battling that for many years with the team. I think there's an opportunity there. It's really about how do we commercialize this to make it efficient and effective. It takes a lot of manpower. It is not something that's click this, do that, make this call. And I think there's several different ways, and one is through education. And I think that's where we spend a lot of time with the talent agencies is they were like, hey, I want to get the most amount of money in the shortest duration of time and not worry about the renewal, but then have a conversation later and be like, oh, don't worry about what happened before. It's like, we're going to worry about what happened before. There is a method to the madness of what we're doing here. And the more we can educate them, they said, look, we don't really understand performance marketing. Many of the talent agencies have just flat out said that. And they're like, it's going to be hard for our ship that's been done the same way for 30, 40 years to steer in this direction. But there are people that are committed to figuring it out because they see the money. They see the opportunity coming in. And I think it's our jobs as stewards to make sure that we promote that line of delineation with networks and how we work with talent across different distribution platforms and help them move forward because every year it gets a little bit better. We want it to move faster, but that's going to take a lot of time and effort and a lot of collaboration, to be honest.
It's like that long-term partnership is what I guess that's where the revenue can really be generated and the partnership can be maximized. I think that's what podcasting's done really well as getting those long-term agreements in place where YouTube is kind of the creators got used to just a lot of one-offs and how do I get the most that I can today for that video or that integration. And so changing that thought process is a battle.
Well, that's interesting. So, because it's more of a Hollywood mentality where, and hence the agents are in it now. And, their business is so hit or miss that it's not like you can go, oh, well, this talent has a track record and we can expect these returns, reliably. All you got to do is put them in this movie. Everything's a one-off, right? And so they've just got to go for the biggest deal they can ink and not really worry about what comes after that. But we're in a business where we're creating annuities, right? And we need that predictability and that reliability so advertisers feel safe investing because they're counting every dollar and not just waiting for a tent pole, every 11 investments to hit. They need to have a little bit better batting average, right? And what I wonder, it's interesting because I think the influencer world outside of podcasting is bigger than podcasting right now, at least, with the definitions that have been applied. But I feel like podcasting, as much as we give ourselves crap about being the wild, wild west, I wonder if we were actually a little more organized in how we do business compared to everybody else, right? I think we've got more to teach them than they have to teach us about a sustainable way of doing business, even though we have a ways to go. I don't know if that's a legitimate claim or not. Bart, you're thinking it is.
1,000%. I think instead many conversations, Connor, myself, the team we've all had is how do we take this and apply it here? Because this is where it was a decade ago with, I think, even less infrastructure. So how we move that is obviously definitely part of the secret sauce. And it's it's going to take some time with how we kind of do that together.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're getting into our final round here. So we'll go around one more time. This time is just your podcast movement. How would you summarize, in any other defining moments? And I'm up first. So, look, I think we put so much into the marketplace at this thing, and I'll just restate what I think some of the key takeaways were. We all were feeling the confusion that clients were experiencing. And frankly, every participant, every stakeholder's been confused about where does podcasting begin and end, right? And the way I think through doing the research with the consumers with Edison and getting all the perspectives from different leaders across the industry, I heard a couple key themes. One is that the tension that exists that's making this so hard on everybody is that there's like a little bit of a battle between people saying, well, it's an audio medium, or actually it's a video medium now. And which is it? Is it this or is it that? Everybody wants to go binary either or. And then there was another tension of, if it's RSS, like we had Pete, and we'll put out each of these episodes of the full interviews, but we had Pete at Podscribe say, I think a podcast has an RSS. And if it doesn't have an RSS, it's not a podcast, right? And you have these RSS purists, because RSS is what makes it open and accessible to everybody and not algorithm dependent. But then you have closed systems, which I think we all have to agree, it's like the brand business. It's necessary to continue to expand the marketplace. You can't just bottleneck it all with you have to let in the closed platforms, whether that's YouTube or Spotify or X or whatever. These are all platforms that we have to find a way to translate. So, and then when we listen, and that was what I heard, those were the two kind of competing forces I heard playing tug of war inside of the industry. And then when you talk to consumers, what was interesting is that they have a little more clarity. They kind of know what a podcast is fundamentally, and they line up around the same things. If it's audio only, it can be a podcast on demand. If it's video only, video with audio, and it's just on YouTube, that's still a podcast to most people. And so I think the consumers have made peace with the audio versus digital, open versus closed. I think they think either one works. And then the last thing with the listeners is they also know that if it's something that you can see and turn off the sound, that's not a podcast anymore if it still works. So they intuitively, I think, have an understanding. And I don't know that it's one stakeholder group that should decide what a podcast is. But as we created a definition, what we really tried to do by listening to everybody and just debating this fiercely was, number one, we needed to acknowledge that it is rooted in the spoken word, even if the video is increasingly important, right? You can have your video can be vital. You can not have video, it can still be a podcast. That was part one. It can be RSS. It can be through a closed platform. It can still be a podcast, but it needs to be episodic and rooted in the spoken word. So, ultimately what we are advocating for here is a bigger tent for the industry where we get away from these stupid squabbles about, is it this or is it that only? And we go, hey, we can widen it out. We can adjust to what's important going forward. But what's really critical to us is that we honor what got us here, because if we just make it another online video and every online video is a podcast, then you don't have the force that actually swung an election. And to that point, just a couple other things I wanted to call out that I thought were important that we were able to introduce to the market in our thinking is that, people have been debating what should we call this thing since day one, and they continue to debate that today. But in my view, kind of circling back to the podcast election, this is a settled issue. When Google decided they were going to call out 1 billion active monthly users, and when Netflix decided to move in, it's settled now. Everybody knows that there's power there, and because there's power, there's money, and because there's money, it's not going to go away. And simulcast, it's not going to replace the term that has gotten into our consciousness and already transcended a player. And then finally, for me, part of this is about defining it, but now what do we do, right? We're really inviting everybody, including if you're a listener to this program right now, we want you to sign our petition. We want you to join us and raise your hand and say, yes, we do want to have some standards in this industry. If you're going to call yourself a podcast purveyor, creator, anything. Let's agree on what that means. Let's agree on a taxonomy for what the critical metrics are. Is it a download? Is it a view? Is it a, hopefully it's an actual impression. That's what I hope we land on, is a unit of measurement that tells us how many people actually heard the commercials, because otherwise nobody cares if the commercial was placed and not actually consumed, right? But we want to see standards and practices here, and we need a couple of the bigger players, namely YouTube and Spotify, with them to come to the table and agree on uniformity, because I think it costs everybody money. I think it constricts the industry. And I think that from the smallest creator to the biggest publisher or platform, everybody will do better if we can just get our story straight in what we say we do and how we measure that. That was my podcast movement. Bart, what about you?
I would echo that entirely. When you were talking about that, Dan, it kind of reminded me, and this may be longer ago, but these years zoomed by, is before even we figured out what the look back window being 24 hours via IAB, like you had impressions and downloads, like it was all over the place. You're completely looking at apples, oranges, and grapefruits, and it just feels like another recalibration is needed, especially with the amount of money pouring in the space. We have accountability that we have to foster, not just for clients, but as stewards of the channel that we basically shepherded out when there was a lot of resistance a dozen years ago. So agree wholeheartedly there.
Good point, Bart.
That's a great call. Okay, Stu, how about you?
I thought it was awesome to get the band back together for the first time. Having all the V1 and the Oxford Road people together was really, really special. And in fact, we did an in-person Ad Infinitum episode at Podcast Movement as well. And that was a treat as well. There was real talk, candor, disagreement, specificity, like a lot of the stuff that I would have liked to see from the stage. Some friction, and the friction is healthy. So it was just great to get everybody together in the same place and face some of the challenges that we're facing all together and chart the course forward.
I love that and totally agree. Connor, how about you?
Me, I mean, it's certainly the whole content around what is a podcast for sure, and seeing your presentation was really neat, and I thought pretty special, but also pretty serious. It was well summarized in terms of, I think, what people have kind of been feeling and poking at around. For me, it goes down there, but again, I also go with Stu as well. Like just being arm in arm and like being one company and being able to say that and feel confident in what we know, what org chart we have and the roles of everybody and all of us, and, just really working together for with a singular vision for the first time, really, as an integrated team, and to do that together was a nice little topper.
Here. People have no idea what we all had to crawl through to get to the point where we could show up arm in arm and united. It's been a long road. It's been a long journey, but it was so beautiful to see it all come together. Randa, we'll give you the final word here.
So what stood out to me this conference was the unified frustration across the board. So publishers, agencies, everyone is fed up with the same issues around data transparency, inconsistent measurements, and just unclear expectations in this new multi-channel world. Publishers are feeling let down. And for the first time, that disappointment is mutual on all sides of the industry. But I have hope. In many of my conversations, the publishers particularly express interest in meeting with one another, collaborating, sharing ideas, and advocating for progress. And Dan, your keynote really helped tee that up. It created a moment where I think everyone on all sides of the fence felt empowered to come together and take action to move the industry forward.
Well, if there's one thing that I hope defines not just our team, but what we're bringing to the industry, I think it's unity. And, what are we trying to do? First, we had to unite, two competing agencies and all get to a place where we got a flow state now. You can feel it on this conversation, right? And we needed to have that. And now we can go out to the marketplace and try to get a lot of competing factions to start rowing in the same direction for everybody's mutual benefit. And I think that's a lot lot of the work that we have to do. It's why we call this the Media Roundtable. It's about sitting around and working it out and making a better ecosystem for all of us. So thank you all for interrupting your Monday for this to go out on a Wednesday. Given all the updates for so many people that weren't able to attend, it's been a great conversation, and thank you all for joining. Well, thank you so much for listening to the Media Roundtable and our wrap up of Podcast Movement Evolutions. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road and Veritone One, which are now united. And we are united in wanting you to succeed in audio and podcasting and creator-based media in a way that uses your influence for good. We believe that you can use these channels to grow your business while building bridges across differences and preserving fair-minded discussion over the most important topics of our age. If you're a marketer and you want to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes, reach out to us. Start by going to oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter. It's called The Influencer. And if you got feedback for us on this particular podcast, you can always contact us directly, info@mediaroundtable.com. We will take your thoughts into account. If you haven't started listening to our other show, it's called Ad Infinitum, and it is Oxford Road's audio, creative, focused podcast. That's where we go deep. You just heard Stu on this panel. Well, he is VP of Creative Services, and that is his baby, and he does an outstanding job for people that really want to dig into the messaging component of this channel. Now, special thanks to so many people because it truly takes a village to get this done. I want to thank Haley, Ruby, Bianca, Kyle, Ezra, Mary Jane, Neil, Everett, and the team at Podcast One. As always, please influence responsibly.
Are you feeling stuck in your career or lacking employment at the moment? Experiencing symptoms of job dissatisfaction? You might be suffering from a common condition known as career stagnation. But don't worry, there's a solution. Monster.com. Monster.com offers a comprehensive suite of career-boosting tools designed just for you. Our free resume review and AI interview prep tool will help you stand out from the crowd. Need more guidance? Dive into our career advice articles for expert tips and insights. And don't forget to check out our salary tools to ensure you're getting paid what you're worth. Side effects may include a new job, increased confidence, and a brighter future. Consult Monster.com today and take the first step towards your new career. Ready for your next job opportunity? Visit Monster.com now.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone? Like yesterday. With Indeed, there's no need to stress. You can find amazing candidates fast using Sponsored Jobs. With Sponsored Jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates so you can reach the people you want faster. And just how fast is Indeed? Well, in the minute I've been talking to you, 23 hires were made on Indeed, according to the Indeed data worldwide. Seriously, there's no need to wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/WonderyUS. Just go to Indeed.com/WonderyUS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/WonderyUS. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.